The room went completely silent when I walked to the Thanksgiving microphone with a folder in my hand. My mother-in-law, Diane, was standing beside the dessert table, still smiling like she owned the night. Then I looked straight at her and said, "Before we cut the pie, everyone deserves to know where the money went." Her smile disappeared. My husband, Mark, whispered my name like a warning. But it was already too late. Because the folder in my hand contained the records Diane had spent months praying I would never see. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 34, a registered nurse, and I grew up in a small Ohio town where my parents taught me two things: work hard and never forget who stood beside you when you had nothing. My dad, Thomas, repaired heating systems for nearly 30 years. My mom, Linda, worked mornings at a grocery store and cleaned offices 3 nights a week. They weren't wealthy. But when I decided I wanted to become a nurse, they made it happen. Dad picked up weekend repair jobs. Mom stopped buying things for herself. They even sold an old fishing boat my dad loved because I needed money for tuition and clinical expenses. I still remember the day I got my nursing license. Mom cried. Dad hugged me and said, "Now you get to build the life we always wanted for you." I never forgot that. Mark and I had been married for 6 years. He was kind when we were dating, and for a long time, I believed I had married someone who understood how much my parents meant to me. Then Diane became more involved in our lives. She was obsessed with appearances. Our Thanksgiving dinners had become enormous events with expensive decorations, catered food, professional photographs, and a guest list that seemed designed to impress people rather than bring family together. That year, Diane announced that Thanksgiving would be at her house. A week before the dinner, I called her to ask what time my parents should arrive. There was a long pause. Then Diane said, "Actually, Claire, we're keeping things smaller this year." I laughed because I thought she was joking. Okay, how small? Immediate family. I knew exactly what she meant. My parents are immediate family. Diane sighed. Claire, please don't make this difficult. Your parents are lovely, but they don't really fit the atmosphere we're creating. I felt something inside me go cold. Atmosphere. She lowered her voice. They show up in old clothes, they talk about work, and your father always tells those stories about fixing furnaces. We're having people here who are important to Mark's career. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father helped pay for my nursing degree. And we're grateful, she said quickly. But Thanksgiving isn't a charity event. I ended the call before I said something I would regret. That night, I confronted Mark. Your mother just excluded my parents from Thanksgiving. He barely looked up from his phone. She probably has a reason. Her reason is that they embarrass her. Mark rubbed his forehead. Claire, please. It's one dinner. No, it's not one dinner. It's years of my parents being treated like they're less important because they don't have expensive clothes or impressive jobs. He finally looked at me. Can you just let this go for once? That sentence hurt more than anything Diane had said. I asked him one simple question. If your parents were being treated this way, would you let it go? He didn't answer. Thanksgiving arrived. I almost didn't go. But Dad told me, don't let someone else's bad behavior steal your holiday. So I went. My parents stayed home. When I arrived at Diane's house, I immediately saw what she meant by important people. There were business owners, lawyers, executives, and several people connected to Mark's company. Diane welcomed everyone like a politician. Then she saw me. Her smile tightened. Claire, you came. Yes, I said. Happy Thanksgiving. She leaned closer. Please don't bring up the invitation situation tonight. I stared at her. You mean the fact that you deliberately excluded my parents? Not tonight. Then she walked away. Dinner began. For the first hour, everything looked perfect. Then Diane stood up and announced that she wanted everyone to celebrate the success of a community charity project she had supposedly funded. Everyone applauded. I knew about that project. Diane had talked about it for months. She claimed she had donated $40,000 to help struggling families receive heating assistance during winter. And that detail made something click. My father had spent his career repairing heating systems. I had recently heard from a former coworker of his that the charity had been struggling to purchase equipment. So during dinner, I quietly searched the charity's public records on my phone. The donation was listed, but the donor name wasn't Diane. It was a small business I had never heard of. Bennett Home Support LLC. My last name. My heart started pounding. I knew that company name. It was connected to a small investment account Mark and I had created years earlier using money I had saved from nursing work. I had barely touched the account. I opened the old statements. Then I saw the transfers. Thousands of dollars had moved from our account into Bennett Home Support LLC. And from there, the money had been donated under Diane's name. I stared at the screen. Diane hadn't donated $40,000. She had used money connected to me and Mark, routed it through a business, and presented the donation as her own. But there was more. Several smaller transfers had been labeled as consulting expenses. The recipient? A company owned by Diane's boyfriend's brother. I saved every statement. Then I called the charity from the bathroom. They confirmed the records. They also told me something else. They had been asked not to mention the original source of the money because Diane wanted the donation publicly credited to her. I returned to the dinner table with my hands shaking. Mark noticed. What's wrong? I showed him the documents. His face changed. He looked toward his mother. Where did you get those? From our account. He went pale. You're sure? I checked twice. He immediately stood. Claire, please don't do anything tonight. I looked at him. Your mother used our money, lied about donating it, and humiliated my parents while doing it. I'll handle it privately. Like you handled her excluding my parents? He had no answer. A few minutes later, Diane stood with a champagne glass and began thanking everyone for believing in her mission. That was when I got up. I walked toward the microphone. Mark whispered, Claire, stop. I didn't. Diane stared at me. What are you doing? I picked up the folder. I thought Thanksgiving was about family and gratitude. So I'd like to share something I'm grateful for. The room became quiet. I'm grateful that I checked the financial records before accepting a story that wasn't true. Diane's face went white. I held up the first page. This $40,000 donation wasn't paid from Diane's personal account. Someone near the table asked, then where did it come from? I looked at Mark. Then at Diane. An account funded by me and my husband. Diane immediately shouted, that is a lie. I calmly held up the next page. Then perhaps you can explain these transfers. The room fell silent. I didn't insult her. I didn't scream. I simply read the dates, amounts, and transaction descriptions. Then I revealed the payments connected to her boyfriend's brother's company. Diane started crying. Mark looked devastated. And the people she had invited to impress suddenly stopped looking impressed. One of the charity representatives, who happened to be there, asked Diane directly whether she had represented the money as her own donation. Diane couldn't answer. That was enough. The charity suspended recognition of her donation. Mark's attorney later advised us to secure our accounts and demand the money back. Diane repaid every dollar after being warned that formal legal action could follow. Mark and I separated soon afterward. Not because of one Thanksgiving dinner. Because I finally understood that a marriage cannot survive when one person repeatedly chooses silence over loyalty. Months later, my parents came to my new apartment for Thanksgiving. Dad brought his famous pie. Mom brought an old tablecloth she had sewn herself. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't perfect. And I loved every inch of it. We laughed until Dad told one of his furnace stories, and this time, nobody looked embarrassed. I eventually started volunteering with a local heating assistance charity in my parents' honor. And I learned something I wish I had understood years earlier. People who value appearances will always try to make you ashamed of where you came from. But the people who sacrificed for you, believed in you, and stood beside you when nobody was watching, that is your real wealth. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't destroying someone. It's simply turning on the light and letting the truth speak for itself.